In the kingdom of Roquefort, where Basile's Pentamerone collects tales too sharp for nursery walls, there lived a princess whose beauty made suitors kneel in courtyards, and whose stubbornness made them rise again without a ring. Her name was Cannetella, little cinnamon, warm brown sweetness in a world that preferred girls who nodded when kings spoke. This is not the tower story the channel told in Petronella. This is the glass coach, the ogre who watched a window, and the 3 walnuts a fairy hid in a pocket when kindness still traveled in shells. If you remember anything, remember gold thread catching sunlight, a cage you can see through, and the moment a princess stopped waiting to be rescued and learned to change shape. Cannetella's father had gone on pilgrimage to Santiago, leaving the court in the hands of counselors who loved peace more than truth. Every day a new prince arrived with horses and promises. Every day Cannetella said the same thing. I will not marry until my father returns. Not cruelty. Condition. She had seen how quickly strangers swore forever when a crown was near. To pass the hours, she sat at a high window weaving thread the color of beaten gold. So fine the court said sunlight got caught in it and forgot to leave. She wore rose brocade with a high collar and kept her dark hair braided for work, not for display. From the road below, suitors could see only her hands and the flash of gold, which is often enough to start a story you cannot finish politely. Far off, in a mountain where civilized maps ended, an ogre looked through enchanted sight and saw the weaving. He did not send flowers. He did not ask the counselors. He marked the window the way hunters mark water where something bright comes to drink. The ogre came on a night when the moon made the palace walls look like silver paper. His coach was cut from a single block of crystal. Transparent, soundless, wrong. Horses whose breath steamed white drew it to Cannetella's window without waking the gate. He climbed through the frame the way ordinary men climb stairs, and before she could scream, he had folded her into the coach like a letter addressed to somewhere with no return. The gold thread snapped in her lap. The palace dropped away below glass. They flew, for that is what crystal coaches do in Pentamerone, over forests and sleeping towns until the ogre's house rose from a black ridge. A palace built of glass and pride, every table, every chair, every cage made to show what it held without hiding the holder. Cannetella understood then that she had not been chosen. She had been collected. Life in the ogre's house was not starvation. That is the first lie people tell about captivity, that it always looks like a dungeon. He gave her gowns stiff with embroidery and meals on plates you could see through. He showed her rooms where the floor was mirror and the ceiling was mirror and a person could forget which way was up. But every corridor ended at his smile. Every gift came with the same unspoken price. Stay visible, stay his. Cannetella learned to weave again because hands that work remember who they belong to. She learned to sing low so the glass would not carry her voice to the valley. She learned that a princess can be lonely in a palace as easily as in a hut. Weeks passed. Her father was still on the road to Santiago. The counselors wrote letters no one could send. And in a hollow beneath the mountain, an old fairy heard a thread of gold snap in a dream and woke with 3 walnuts in her palm. The fairy came as a washerwoman at the palace stream, which is how benevolent powers enter when ogres lock the front door. She scrubbed a prince's shirt that was not there and sang a song Cannetella recognized from childhood lullabies. Child of Roquefort, she said without looking up. The road home is not always walked on feet. Take these. One for the dog's shape, one for the mist, one for what must meet him when he follows. Break them only when your hands shake. Swallow the shells after. Ogres read pockets, not bellies. Cannetella hid the walnuts as she was told. That night, the ogre drank deep from a cask of southern wine and slept with his head on a glass table. She broke the first shell. Fur rushed over her skin. A hound with her eyes ran out into the moonlight. Behind her, the palace chimed like wind through bottles, and the mountain held its breath. At the border of her father's lands, Cannetella broke the second walnut. Mist poured from the shell and wrapped her. Not a dog now, but a gray veil of morning fog rolling down a familiar hill. She slipped past checkpoints where guards asked questions of solid things. By noon, she stood in her own courtyard in torn brocade, barefoot, human again, the empty shells swallowed like bitter seeds. The counselors fell to their knees. The suitors stared as if she had walked out of a chapel wall. Cannetella asked only for water and a loom. Her father was still away. She would still wait for him before she married, but she would wait on her side of the glass now. Far on the mountain, the ogre woke to an empty cage and a broken wine cup. Basile does not waste sympathy on monsters who confuse possession with courtship. The ogre took up his coach and followed the scent of gold thread toward Rochefort. He arrived at dusk the way storms arrive, suddenly with the whole sky darkening around one center. The crystal coach blocked the gate. His voice shook the windows. "Give her back. She is mine by sight and by taking." Cannetella walked out alone. No prince stepped in front of her. She had not asked for one. She broke the third walnut between her palms and became what the fairy had saved for pursuit. Not a dog, not mist, but a lioness of mountain stone and fury, golden eyes the color of her weaving. The ogre leaped from his coach with arms wide, still believing size was the same as right. The lioness met him once. Glass shattered the way glass always shatters when something heavy learns its own weight. When the fog cleared, Cannetella stood in the road in her father's colors, the last shell swallowed, the coach cracked open like a broken egg. The suitors finally understood why she had waited. Her father returned from Santiago on a donkey thin from prayer and found his daughter at the loom, the ogre's coach in splinters at the gate, and a story the counselors could not flatten into diplomacy. He listened without interrupting, which is rare in kings. And when she finished, he said, "You set one condition for marriage. I set none for your choosing." She married a prince who had waited without forcing the window, who knew the difference between wanting and owning. The fairy was not invited to the feast. Fairies rarely are. But 3 walnut trees grew in the palace garden where none had been planted, and on autumn nights the wind in their leaves sounded like someone breaking a shell with care. Basile wrote Cannetella down so princesses would know captivity can be transparent and still be a cage. And that escape sometimes requires becoming what you are not for as long as it takes to reach home. If you remember anything, remember the window, the coach, and the 3 shapes in the walnuts. This was forgotten Fables. This was Cannetella. The Pentamerone tale of gold thread, glass, and a girl who changed form rather than change her terms.